All right, so welcome back to another class. Today we're going to be covering Jett's tier list in terms of maps. We're going to be kind of observing a little bit of what we covered in the past, and we're going to be looking at what's relevant for her today. Just a big reminder, we're holding a big raffle, okay? We're going to be holding a jersey raffle for C9. If that's your favorite team or you just want a jersey, maybe with your name on it, you can kind of go in and look at all the videos that we've done in the past. Just make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, and that should give you a huge entry. Okay, we're going to be going and perusing at all the ones that actually do all of those little things, and then we're going to be holding a raffle at the end once we reach 1,000 subscribers. Okay, so with the class, we're going to be looking really quickly at everything that comprises Jett's map tier list. Okay, so before we even start that, we kind of have to do a little bit of understanding what we talked about in the previous class. We have to do a little bit of a recap, and then we're going to jump into some things that you can do, some common plays that kind of happen in the class. In the maps. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons again. Okay, these are things that allow her to just be good at the game, right? Like, she has really easy to use utility, makes her applicable almost everywhere. She's very adaptable, and that same utility complements a very hit and run play style where she can kind of go in, kind of see what's going on, and then leave. She has a get out of jail free card that allows her to make this play style. It allows her to be fast as well. So if she wants to take a piece of space anywhere on the map, she can do it just by paying attention to how she's using this utility. Last but not least, she has an op in her playstyle. If you can use the op, I would recommend that you use it. Okay, cons obviously would be something like the timings. It's really easy to get her utility out. Same thing with the ultimate. It's very easy to use. To get out, but at the same time, when it comes to actually using it appropriately, there might be things that you might mess up. So for example, the timing between the way that you are preparing for a fight, maybe you updraft and you updraft too early. You pop your dash, your team isn't going in, now you're out of a dash, right? These are things that you're going to be encountering in terms of issues when it comes to understanding how her kit works. But most of the time, because of how easy it is to use, these are things that you might hit a wall with occasionally. Okay, if you're really hitting a wall with these cons, then that means that there's something wrong inherently with your playstyle or with the team that you're playing. And I suggest that you kind of look back, do a VOD review of yourself, and pay attention to that. The second thing we covered was kind of the relevancy of Jett in the current meta. When you're playing ranked, and we're gonna be covering this this tier list in terms of ranked and how it works in ranked, but it's going to very loosely resemble what you see in pro play. So when pro play raises the meta, and she's gonna be changed, and it's gonna happen. But as it stands right now, any map that Raze is not played in, Jett is played in most of the time. You can see the 67% on Icebox. Some of it will go to Yoru and other characters, right? We'll see the same thing with Breeze. Again, Yoru's another pick. Blame the APAC teams, but that's a thing that we see, right? Most of the time, if Raze is not applicable, then you might see Jett being applicable, and that's just the way it works. Like, for example, Bind 100% on Raze, and you don't see 100% on Jett. And with that out of the way, right, we can see that this would mean that the 3 maps that she's played on would make her the best at. And then that's where that loose resemblance comes in. The rest of the maps are still playable for Jett. It's just that Raze is just a little bit better in team play. Let's talk a little bit about solo play and understanding how this might help her out. Okay, when we're looking at the maps, I've ranked them from S tier to D tier. The maps that are S tier are essentially going to be the backbone of where everything else is being ranked. Okay, you're gonna notice that the 3 maps that are currently not in the pool are not being ranked in the little thing, but I can mention them at the end. Okay, so the 2 maps that you have to look out for are going to essentially be Ascent and Icebox. On the A side of things, we're going to be looking at things like Breeze. And the reason I put that there is because that's essentially where you see Yoru pop up a lot. He's one of those characters that you can really use. And in ranked, I've seen that a lot of people struggle in using her for entry. So that doesn't make it immediately S tier. Like, we can incorporate things like how we can get our hit and run tactics at the beginning. Perhaps in a lot of different main scenarios, we can't really get that going. Okay, when we're looking specifically at Split, she still has some play in pro play because we can see how easy it is to kind of break through a lot of those different entry points, like for example on A main and in B main, really easy to get through. It's just that when you use Raze, it's just easier to use that utility early and then not worry about your team dying behind you. So that's why they're a little bit lower on the list. And last, it's Lotus. I don't really see anything in particular that really fits her there. There's some things you could use still, but in comparison to the usability of her on something like Ascent, you're not really going to get anything on something like Lotus, okay? So we have to just pay attention to what you can do. You could use her on defense. You can still have the op, but why would you replace that? Sorry, why would you replace something like having Raze or maybe even Neon if you want to experiment with that, as opposed to having something like, you know, a chamber in that place, right? So keep in mind those pros and cons really just start getting more and more con, right? So pay attention to that when you're picking the map, okay? So we're looking at things like Ascent and Icebox as the main two. So why is Ascent S tier? And again, these are the main things that we're picking up on. S tier simply because there's strong early positioning on both attack and on defense. She's able to get really strong spots that allow her to get an early pick. It's a very intense vertical map. There's some areas that just right off the bat allow her to be really useful, okay? So for example, we're going to show an example of how she can gain a really early head start on gaining high ground, right? So these are things that you can use to your advantage. Other characters that can use that verticality tend to be really useful as well, like Omen, okay? Last but not least, we have really strong sightlines. They're very long, which allow her op playstyle to kind of come in fruition. So let's look at 3 common plays. First one is, let's look at how she can use that mobility to her advantage, right? So we can see in the example right there, she's able to kind of get an early head start. And if the team swings with her or takes the time or the flash is going up, you can use that potential to catch an enemy off guard. One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people think that they can hear the jumping. Most of the time players aren't really focused on that. Or if other noise, like other people swinging behind you, are also pushing with you, they're not going to hear these jumps. Okay, most of the time, the only time they would only see you up there is if they're preparing for it. You've done it in the past, or they've seen that problem in the past before, and they're just kind of dealing with it. Okay, but high ground like this is something that you can use. You can use this, for example, later over there. You can kind of, if I can pause this, you can stay up there. You can kind of start at the beginning and then just kind of updraft up there if you want to take that spot. Even when you come in, you can dash and take that generator spot, right? There's some high ground that you can take. So high ground is really, really important in this map. Okay. Second thing that you might look at is a common play. So I talked about her hit and run tactics. And this is why this map, and you might see it on Breeze as well, you might see it on Icebox as well, but her hit and run tactics allow her to get an early pick right off the bat. Based on the last class that we did, masterclass wise for fundamentals, okay, it's really important to look at first bloods if you're going to climb. Okay, first bloods are super important. So you can see how it's really easy to get this angle and using her dash to really get out of the way. Really, really important to look at that. Okay. Next thing that we're going to be looking at is just this tier list over here in terms of how the common play works with knives and ops. Okay. She has really, really strong control. Okay, with the knives and the ops. If you look at these 2 positions right here, it's really easy to kind of get some early high ground and maybe catch opponents off guard, or you can use the op to essentially control 2 different lanes depending on what it is that you're trying to do with your team. Okay, it's really, 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 really important that you look at these types of like positions to kind of gain an edge. And then what we talked about is like that whole idea of like that fluid and adaptive mobility. So we can kind of start trying to pay attention to what it is that we need to do to kind of get an advantage. Okay. So let's move on from there. Let's talk a little bit about why Icebox is S tier. Okay, we've talked about that verticality works really, really well for Jett. Okay, works really well. So a map like this is perfect for her. When we're looking at something like Breeze, you can still use that verticality, but it's not as often, right? Some of it is really accessible to other characters, so that's why it's not on that S tier category, whereas this one is. Secondly, there's a lot of off angles that you can start at the beginning, especially on defense. On defense, she's a powerhouse. So if you're looking at places to kind of use that off angle potential, chamber you could also technically use, but we're going to see how she can kind of gain like some quick fights without any hassles, which is why you would pick Jett over chamber when it comes to keeping her as both an entry and also like a really defensive op support. So common plays that we can look at. Number 1, we can see how she can use her passive to gain really, really sneaky off angles. Now, these are really common in particular, like she can gain control of these main areas with it, but the fact that she can do it with like minimal resources, as opposed to something like Raze that she might potentially have to use, like understanding the tech with the double jump here, over here by using the rope, right? These are things that we have to keep in mind when you're thinking about Jett. She's really easy. She's hassle-free. She can get that position instantly, no problem. Okay, using that passive ability. And then next on the list, this on second thought, this might seem a little bit confusing, so I'll just kind of describe it in just a sec. Okay, so things like, for example, taking any form of sight. So in this position, taking a sight, she has a lot of pressure that she can give on maps like Icebox because she has a lot of routes that she can take. And all of these routes can be done simply with her dash and her updraft. Okay, the main thing that I talked about is her dash. So if you're looking at something like taking this area right here and you want to take control, you have multiple ways of doing it. So for example, let's say you want to take this control right here. You can start right at the beginning. You can have dash ready in case you want to deal with any of these dangerous angles. And then you can then move forward and then proceed to take this back area really quickly. If you want to take it a little bit slower, maybe you want to scout what's going on in these areas, you can take this green. You can kind of use, again, that drift ability to kind of move around different locations without having to sacrifice noise or any of that sort. And then you can kind of proceed to kind of either take control of nest or jump down, whatever it is that you need to, right? But she's able to do all of these different things, take all of these different routes simply through the usage of her kit. Characters like Raze need to invest utility to stay this mobile. Characters like Yoru need to forego potentially keeping high ground and potentially being caught off guard by using the zipline, right? Because you're not using the zipline on Jett, they're not going to know you're there. Sometimes they can hear the drift going on, they can hear the passive going off, but most of the time in the midst of a fight or the midst of a push, they might not even catch that, right? So it's important to note that this is why these routes are possible and why they're a little bit better on a character like Jett than the opposition or potentially the competition when it comes to the different duelists that you can use. Okay. Last but not least, we're going to be looking at how she can use the operator. Again, we've talked about how the op works really good in tandem with the different types of off angles that you can gain. So off of this, we've seen that we can use two different off angles here. We can use another off angle right here by using the generator area that I just showed. Based on the different angles that we can use here, we can see that she's able to stay mobile and take different spots. So let's say, for example, you start over here by green, take green out, nothing happens, fine. You can rotate over using your drift, high mobility, take control of this lane, you're good to go, right? You can now control this lane. You can now coerce the enemy. Oh, we lost somebody here. Let's see if we can find a pick this way. Now we have another player right there. It's really useful for making a lot of these fights easier for yourself because you can coerce the enemy into a different site. And that's what you see a lot of pros do. They'll give the op to a particular player and they'll be like, okay, control this lane. And what's going to happen is it's either it goes their way and they do not hit this lane at all, or they have to go through more difficult areas in order to hit that site, or they must use more utility, right? So this is why it's really, really useful to think about it in that way. Okay. So with that out of the way, those are some different examples, different plays that you might use with Jett in the two maps that I believe are S tier that you should be using, not only according to what we see in the evidence with the pro play, but based on her kits and what she can do